Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in the Resilience Finance Days for the Caribbean. Also, thank you for joining us in this specific panel on the dimensions of resilience. Today, we are going to focus on specific key dimensions that we have identified. So we are going to focus on social inclusivity, on climate resilience and biodiversity conservation specifically. And I'll be moderating the panel. I'm Marta Juste, transformation analyst at Gawa Capital. And we have with us as well to Davide Forcella, which is the director of the Just Institute, and Cara Foster, which is the director for Latin America and the Caribbean at SPTF. So thank you both as well for participating today. I would like to start introducing Scale for Resilience, which is the initiative which has organized today's event. So it's an initiative that is under the framework of initiatives of Race to Resilience, organized and fostered by UNCCC. And we have a very specific mission, which is making 3 million vulnerable populations, mainly smallholders, more resilient by the year 2030. We want to make this with two key objectives, which is creating access to nature-based solutions, mainly agricultural support and agricultural best practices and technology, and also enabling the necessary conditions so that financing flows into nature-based solutions. We have an ecosystem of members, which is very varied and covers the entire financial value chain. It's a great ecosystem that we want to keep on growing. And as of today, it's conformed by MFIs, which are the direct contact with end clients and mainly with the smallholders, facilitators such as software developers, which provide their softwares so that MFIs can reach better and more smallholders, research institutes, which are the ones that know from firsthand what are the main problems and challenges of smallholder farmers and how can we help them, and investors, which are in the middle between MFIs and other broader regulators, international regulators and investors, and are a key point of contact as well. So it's a great ecosystem, as you see, that covers the entire financial value chain, and it's great to keep on growing it. Also, we want to focus on value creation. So this initiative has several activities so that their members can receive value. So we promote knowledge sharing between members. So for instance, members doing running events for other members on themes of expertise. Also networking so that different members can get to know each other, can cooperate, and also can discuss about potential challenges and opportunities and solutions. Also knowledge transfer from the initiative toward their members. So for instance, today's events, different webinars that we have organized in the past, publication of articles, and maybe MFI coaching in specific cases as well. And we want to promote visibility of our members. So we are open for sharing content of our members in case they want to share it through the initiatives platforms. Then why should we focus on financing resilience, and mainly in agriculture? So basically, small-scale farmers are one of the main producers of the world's food supply. So they are very important in the world food supply, basically, and they are heavily exposed to climate variability. So they are exposed to impacts on loss of productivity, crop losses, and food insecurity. This climate variability they are exposed to generates new financing needs, mainly related to adaptation products, because as there are climate events and climate shocks, they have to be prepared to react to these events. So here, nature-based solutions are key because they have an enormous potential to help vulnerable communities to be more resilient to climate variability. Basically, nature-based solutions are, in general, actions that can help restore, manage, and protect natural ecosystems, while also tackling or solving social challenges. They can have several different kind of benefits, but the ones that we focus on through this initiative is the climate change adaptation strategy of smallholders. So we think that through nature-based solutions, smallholders can improve their income, can be more resilient to climate events, and also can use sustainably ecosystems. So basically, there are some examples here of nature-based solutions that can help on the adaptation strategy of farmers. So we have agroforestry, which includes integration of trees, shrubs, and crops, as well as animal farming all together. Also efficient irrigation systems, which can include drip irrigation, which is one of the most efficient, water-efficient way of irrigating many different plantings. Organic fertilizers, which can be not only to assist plants, but also they help the soil with improved soil texture, it holds water longer, etc. And also integrated pest management, which instead of using chemical pesticides, it can be good to use some other type of cultural control, such as crop rotation, to keep the pests from expanding. So these are some examples of nature-based solutions. As I mentioned, these solutions can have different benefits. So we focus through the initiative and adaptation. We focus on resilient food production, but there's also a benefit in climate change mitigation, which is reducing carbon emissions by avoiding deforestation. And also it can help enhancing biodiversity, which is, it helps increasing habitat diversity, basically. So nature-based solutions is a great component that can help foster the different resilience dimensions that we have identified to an extent. So these resilience dimensions, as I mentioned earlier, are social inclusivity, climate resilience, and biodiversity conservation. Through Scale for Resilience, through this initiative, we focused mainly on climate resilience. But as we are going to see now, there are other type of organizations that can focus on a broader perspective in general on the resilience dimensions. So here I would like Davide Portella, the director of the JUST Institute, to explain to us what the JUST Institute does, what resilience dimension does it focus on, or if it focuses on all of them, and what initiatives it is involved in. So Davide, the floor is yours. I think you're gonna share a screen as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the possibility to be here. Please let me know if you see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Do you see full screen? Okay,
yes.
Good. So thanks a lot, Marta, for this great introduction. Thanks a lot for Scale for Resilience, for this invitation and for the great work you're doing together with the GAVA Capital, YAPU, and CGR and CIAT Biodiversity Alliance. So I want to spend the 10 minutes I have to tell you a bit what we do in the JUST Institute and to bring into the broad discussion the key role of biodiversity on two different angles. Maybe spending 2 words on the biodiversity first and then go into the broad picture, because we close with nature-based solution. I think nature-based solution is a clear example of a solution that can allow, on one side, to tackle multiple resiliencies, for example, social inclusion, as well as biodiversity conservation, as well as climate change adaptation. On the other side is an interesting strategy, because it's been seen that by preserving biodiversity, you can clearly help to achieve sustainable goal, and the other time you can help to reduce vulnerability of poorer population to main challenge, among which health, among which climate risk, of course, among which food security, etc., etc. So what do we do? Who is the JUST Institute? The JUST Institute is a recently founded institute non-for-profit that has been launched together by a private-public partnership composed by the Global Environmental Facility, the GEF, from the World Bank, and the BNP Paribas Group, and that has been growing its base of members through United Nations Agency to the impact investors, etc. Our main scope is to try to move forward the sector toward a triple set of resiliencies and positive impact along biodiversity, climate, and inclusivity, and try to build a couple of bridges that I think were very important between the private and public sector, and even more, let's say, innovative between inclusive and conventional financial sector, where we clearly try to make the link between what's happening at the conventional finance level to the inclusive finance level, but we try to achieve the objective that there is no an inclusive finance and an exclusive or a conventional finance, but all finance should be inclusive, no matter at which level of the financial chain you are financing it. Our member are commercial banks, corporate, and insurance on one side, so that's basically represent the conventional sector, financial sector. On the other side, you see inclusive finance and impact investors, so representing the impact investor side. Of course, there is an intersection between the two, and as well as international and public agency. Our goal is to mainstream biodiversity and adaptation finance, in particular for the one that needed the most, so smallholder farmer, rural communities, small, medium, micro enterprises. To do that, we have been identify certain barrier or why this is not happening, and we try to develop our product and services in a way to try to break this barrier. The first barrier we've been observed is that nature-based solution is not financed at scale as it should be, and the quality as it should be, for a lack of transparency. It means we don't really know who is financing this nature-based solution and to which extent, neither what is the effectivity and the quality. So if you look to a microfinance institution, a corporate or a bank does not really know what is inside their own portfolio in terms of the capacity to adapt to climate change, to cope with biodiversity loss, etc. The other is a lack of capacity. So usually the financial institution has reduced capacity in terms of assessment and management of climate, biodiversity, inclusivity risk. And then, of course, is the lack of product and services. So quite often, neither investor, neither intermediary financial institution has already developed services and financial products and non-financial products that target specifically adaptation to climate change, biodiversity conservation, and inclusivity. Neither an investor that pretend to refinance such institution as a ready-made solution or financial product to do it. What do we do at the Just Institute? We developed the set of products and services, try to tackle this barrier. On one side, we provide an ISO certification of financial institution, SME banks, microfinance institution, cooperatives, to know what is actually inside the portfolio. And we certify which part of the portfolio is supporting climate change adaptation and biodiversity conservation. In lack of capacity, we work on to training and capacity building, ongoing and peer learning and expert coaching for financial intermediary institutions to enable to integrate biodiversity risk and climate risk into their activities in terms of client assessment, portfolio management, etc. And we very much focus on to operational strategic advisory to investor, to international agency, to impact investor on developing adapted financial products that can support a better price for investment that can give as a return higher resiliencies to climate change, to biodiversity erosion, as well as a positive impact on biodiversity. I just want to spend 2 words. For example, one of the products we work the most recently is structuring sustainability linked loans that as an indicator that reward with a reduced interest rate and with additional technical assistance, the investees that are able to show an improvement into inclusivity, into biodiversity conservation and generation of resiliencies for their client. We implement these things in various projects. As here you see 2 that are available online. The detail of the projects with our partners, so the GEF, the Global Environmental Facility, the IFAD from the United Nations, the BNP Paribas, and the Fondation Grameen Crédit Agricole. These 2 projects are also implemented in partnership in terms of technology provider with the Yapu solution. It is also part of Scale for Resilience. And the Just Institute has been the one designing this project, the one leading the implementation and coordinating the various actors. So this is what are the dimensions we work, how that they represent the various side of vulnerability, of resiliencies that we discussed. So we see into the Just Institute the implementation of what is called into the field double materiality. So in a sense, biodiversity losses and climate crisis and lack of inclusion is a threat. There is an exposure of society and economy to biodiversity losses. So this is going to reduce, for example, food security, to climate crisis that is going to destroy, for example, asset, to lack of inclusion that is going to destroy or reduce skills into the society. And there where we need to build multidimensional resiliencies. So resiliencies to reduce such vulnerability and being able to operate in an adapted environment. But how to do that? On the other side, society and economy as on the reverse side of the coin, by their own operation, affect negatively biodiversity, affect negatively climate change by emitting greenhouse gases, and typically they are also generate exclusion. So what we aim and to push forward are solutions that generate this multiplicity of resiliencies by also reducing the impact they generate on the ecosystem, climate, and social and society, and fostering positive impact. So to aim to a just transition. So a just transition is a transition where the most vulnerable ones are included. We build this multiplicity of resiliencies and are included into a sustainable way in which they can produce more with higher revenue, lower volatility on revenue, and preserving the ecosystem. That's basically the theory of change we push forward. So we focus on inclusivity. So basically on small scale, first producer and vulnerable population. To do that in a scenario of climate crisis, we aim to build adaptive capacity to climate change. We aim to do that through biodiversity conservation. And by doing that, we realize an inclusive climate change mitigation. Two words maybe on biodiversity before going the words to Cara. So biodiversity is a key element. The question is, how do we generate ecosystem while strengthening livelihoods of people? Because are often the people that depend the more near to biodiversity. But before going that, I imagine we have an idea of what biodiversity is, and the question is why that's an important dimension of resiliency. Biodiversity has a potential complex definition, but in very simple terms, it means variety of life. And if you know about resiliencies, it is very important to diversify your sources if you have a risk. That's exactly what biodiversity does. And biodiversity is a variety of life, means to generate a variety of living beings that generate both the society and economy and ecosystem much more resilience to a multiplicity of possible events. It strongly contributes to disaster resilience, to food and water supply, to medication, to industrial and material building, to technology progress, crop variety, ecosystem services, carbon sequestration, etc. So it's key for our life. What typically we look into this field is agrobiodiversity. That is the diversity normally part of agricultural sector, so crop, livestock, forestry, etc. And is very key because can be preserved only through the active management by farmer, local knowledge and culture, and of course sustainable practices. And the question is, generate clearly great productivity in terms of integrate benefit in terms of productivity, that clearly is a revenue per se, food security, economic return, etc. And the point is, can we actually promote this financing, and how do we aim to finance that? Is by supporting the sector to improve transparency, as stated before, to see who is doing what and which result, generating better knowledge to be able to identify the risks that come from this from the loss of biodiversity, and adapting the products to finance them. Now, want to go that into detail. My time is ending, but I just want to spend 2 words here. We spoke a lot about climate crisis. We are in the middle of a huge biodiversity crisis. You see here some data. One important thing about biodiversity identify is that on one side is what our colleague from the Jeff used to say is the GDP of the poor, because it's where they basically generate their own livelihoods. But on the other side, it's not just a matter of poor. More than half of our economy depends from nature. So with this huge financial risk, because you're in the scenario of a loss of biodiversity. I don't want to go into that, just 2 words here. the experience into biodiversity conservation is nascent, but there are experiences that going back till 2008. I want just to remark these things. There are not too many, but there are experiences in inclusive finance. You see some here. I'm not going to go into the detail. That has been focused on to try to restore biodiversity, working with financial intermediary institutions, and some of them are nearby the Caribbean. So it was in the Central America and Caribbean back in time. So voila, giving the word to Cara. I just want to make the link, but as probably some of you knows that I've been have the luck to also be a coordinator of the Green Inclusive and Climate Smart Finance Action Group. That is a group of action hosted by the European Microfinance Platform. And since 8 years, we developed the Green Index. The Green Index is the main environmental performance tool that has been integrated since the origin into the tool SPI that some of you knows. And luckily, as we will hear from Cara, we've been working together with SPTF and CERIS to develop for the first time the 7th dimension, that is the environmental dimension of the Universal Standard for Social and Performance Management. And what I would like to say that for the first time, this allows both in the Dimension 7 and the Green Index 3.0 to include on the same side environmental conservation and vulnerability reduction. So in the Green Index 3.0, as well in Dimension 7, it is not possible anymore to try to preserve the environment while do not focus on to generating resilience. Resilience is to what? Climate change, environmental degradation, biodiversity losses, energy poverty that affect the most poor population, and of course, lack of clean water and sanitation. But with that, I leave the words to Cara.
Well, Davide, thank you very much for your introduction. It's great to see that through the JUST Institute, you have such a great integrated focus on societal, economic, and environmental problems that are rising nowadays. And now I will share my screen. And we have as well with us today Cara Foster, which is the Director for Latin America and the Caribbean at SPTF. And it would be great to hear from her what is the SPTF doing, also what alliances is it having, initiatives, and also to know into what scope the SPTF is going into the resilience dimensions. Let's recall that the resilience dimensions we are focusing on are social inclusivity, climate resilience, and biodiversity conservation. So thank you, Cara. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Marta, and thank you to Scale for Resilience for the invitation today. The second the lights just went out. Okay, back on. So I would like to begin by just sharing a little bit with you about what is SPTF and how we are working on the topic of resilience. Most of our work focuses on the inclusion part and resilience, both in areas of social and environmental performance of financial institutions. So as some of you may know, last year, SPTF and CERIS merged to be one entity. SPTF has been working on the universal standards for more than 10 years. And CERIS has always made the social audit tool that allows microfinance institutions to evaluate their social and environmental performance. And since 2014, the CERIS tool has been completely aligned with the SPTF's universal standards. So now that we have always worked together, but now we are one organization with one budget and one team and one strategy. So that's exciting news. Next. And also something that happened last year that is exciting is that we launched the version 3.0 of the universal standards. So in February 2022, we published the updated version of the universal standards, and it now has a dimension on environmental performance management. So ever since 2014, it has been an optional module, and about a third of the financial institutions that used the SPI social audit tool chose to also evaluate their environmental performance. But now, I think given the level of climate change that's affecting the world, especially in the Caribbean, This is no longer going to be optional. It's going to be an obligatory part of evaluating your social performance. And if you go next slide, you can see how the Green Index and the universal standards have evolved together. And so over the last couple of years, we made a big effort to make sure that everything in Dimension 7 is aligned with Green Index and vice versa. So the Dimension 7 allows financial service providers to evaluate their environmental performance. And it's kind of the first step because this is a new topic for a lot of financial institutions. But for those who want to go deeper, the Green Index gives more detail and more indicators that allows them to really examine with more depth that environmental performance. Next, please. So I think there are three main steps that I want to talk about here in environmental performance management. And the first is convincing your institution to work on this topic. And I think Davide did a great job of presenting a lot of the why. Why is this an important topic? What are the consequences if we don't work on it? So the most vulnerable populations are the most affected by climate change. And the social purpose of microfinance and inclusive finance is often to reach the excluded people and the vulnerable populations, particularly those living in rural areas. So these are the people who are experiencing reduced productivity in agriculture, greater variability in their income streams, sometimes loss of physical assets due to environmental disasters, loss of life, and impacts on health and livelihoods. So adaptation to climate change absolutely helps to strengthen resilience, both for the clients and for the financial institution itself. Next, please. One way to convince your institution that this is important for them to work on is to really talk about the direct risks that your financial institution faces because of climate change and biodiversity impacts that the world is experiencing, and to also highlight the potential benefits. So in terms of direct risk, we have financial risks that can impact portfolio quality. For example, if the crops that have always grown in one place no longer grow there, or there are operational risks if branches become inaccessible due to flooding or hurricanes or earthquakes. There's a reputational risk, especially the European investors and social and impact investors now need to comply with environmental regulations and standards. And so they're looking for financial institutions to include in their portfolio that take this seriously. And it also may help you comply with national regulations. In terms of the potential benefits, this offering these kinds of green products and services and support to your clients in terms of agricultural extension services that can help them adapt to climate change allows you to stand out from the competition. So it's a competitive advantage for the financial institution. It creates value for your clients and value for your portfolio. And it can help you attract new clients and new investors. So those are some of the talking points that you can use to convince your financial institution that they should, in fact, embrace this new methodology and work on this topic. Next, please. All right, so once you've convinced your institution that they should really take a look at their environmental performance management, what can you do next? How do you get started? And we propose to do a baseline evaluation using the SPI Online. The SPI Online is the social audit tool. It used to be based in Excel. Some of you may have used the Excel version, but now with the new version of the universal standards, there's an integrated online platform. It's a very powerful tool. It has everything you need to evaluate your institution, as well as access resources about how to conduct the evaluation and also how to implement the practices that are described in the tool. And it's all in one platform with everything available free and online. And so a good place to begin is simply with Dimension 7. And it's possible there to use this tool in pieces. So if you just want to evaluate your performance on Dimension 7, you can do that. If you want to evaluate your performance on both social and environmental, you can do that. So this tool is structured like Russian dolls. So there's a little version that's just Dimension 7, then there's a bigger version that's like half of the indicators. And then there's the complete version that is all of the indicators. That's very complete. So we want to meet each institution where they are and make sure that they have a tool that's right for them. Next, please. So to tell you a little bit more about what is in the Dimension 7, which is how we've defined environmental performance management, the first standard is to have an environmental strategy. Basically, define that strategy, integrate it into your organization's strategic plan, and collect data to allow you to understand if you are achieving the objectives outlined in that strategy. The second standard is environmental risks and opportunities. And so this is really a mandate for the financial institution to look at environmental risks, both at the level of their clients and at the level of the financial institution itself. So what are the risks and what are the opportunities? And what kind of practices and technologies do you need to address those risks? So those are the things that we evaluate with that second standard. And then with the third standard, we have environmental products and services. And this looks at both financial and non-financial products and services that have an environmental focus. So, helping clients buy solar panels, helping small holder farmers use better agricultural practices, all those kind of things. So with this step, the SPI Online allows you to evaluate your environmental performance, identify your strengths and weaknesses, what practices are already being implemented, and where you have some gaps. And then it also allows you to compare your performance with your peers, both at the regional level and at the global level. Sorry, can you still see my screen? I have a little bit of a connection problem.
We can hear you fine. Can you see the screen?
Oh, yes, great. So then the third step is to define an environmental strategy. So after you've done this evaluation, what's the next step? How do you begin to work on this topic? And that is define the environmental strategy. And these are the key steps, right? That you identify the risks and opportunities. You take that information from the evaluation that you did, establish your institutional priorities based on your budget, your local context, your human resources, your client portfolio, and really focus on what do you want to work on first. And then define the institution's position. What are you going to do first with your environmental strategy? And then identify the relevant action plans and make sure that those actions are incorporated into the business plan, the operational plans or annual plans of the staff and managers, so that those things are really worked on and followed up on. We recommend incorporating the environmental strategy into the overall strategic plan of the financial institution. And then we also really encourage partnerships, which I think is one of the things that's come through in every one of the speakers in this session, is the importance of partnership. So you can't do this by yourself, and you don't have to. There's help available to you for every step of the way. So, strategy design, evaluation, and technical assistance, financing. There's absolutely partnerships available to you for every one of those steps. And you can do it by yourself if you want to do it for free. But if you want to have help and you can invest in that work, then there are experts available to help you with those steps. So do not feel like you're alone or you have to know everything from the beginning. We're absolutely here to help, and there are experts available to help you. And a lot of times it does not have to be a significant cost for you to begin to work on this kind of project. And as with all of the social and environmental performance management that we do at SPTF, we really recommend that you begin small and you go step by step. Just make a commitment in your institution to continuous improvement, and then just really go step by step in the way that makes sense for you and your context. So that's what the SPTF is doing in terms of environmental performance management. That is what we recommend. And now to turn the focus a little bit more towards resilience, I wanted to mention that last year we published a guide on how to build resilience in inclusive finance organizations. And that is both looking at building resilience at the individual level in the organization's leadership, and also at the level of the financial institution. So next slide. The way we define resilience is that it is advancing despite adversity. So this is something that, as we saw in the picture on the previous slide, you can see the papaya is growing out of a cinder block wall, but it's not just growing, it's giving fruit, right? So it's thriving despite the adversity of its situation. And that's what we're trying to help our clients do as well. Next, please. So this is the kind of the academic definition of organizational resilience. It's the ability of the organization to anticipate, prepare for, respond to, and adapt to both incremental change and sudden disruptions in a way that permits the institution to both survive and prosper. Next, please. So if you look at all the different words that are in that definition, there's a lot in there. And so basically, with anticipate, we mean that's before. So anticipate and prepare for, that happens before the crisis, right? So before the pandemic, before the hurricane, there are things that you can do to get ready for whatever the next crisis is. During is the response. So, when the pandemic came, what do we do to respond in the moment of crisis? And then afterward is the adaptation. And this is a really important moment for learning, because after we're done with the crisis, we can reflect on what worked well and what didn't work in terms of our response to the previous crisis. And if we integrate those lessons learned into our policies and operations, then we are better prepared for the next crisis. Next slide. I wanted to share this quote with you. We interviewed a dozen financial institutions in 6 different countries in Latin America to help inform the resilience guide. And this is my favorite quote out of that process, from Luis Fernando Sanabria, who's the general manager of Fundación Paraguaya, which is a microfinance institution that is both very socially strong and financially strong. And he said, we followed the universal standards out of the pandemic, and the standards are aligned with the recommendations of the resilience guide. So, one of the institutions that had the most resilient response and the most successful response to the pandemic really viewed the universal standards for social and environmental performance as the recipe for resilience. And so I think that is a good endorsement, and something that I hope all of you will take to heart when you're trying to create resilience in your own institutions. And then the last thing that I wanted to share with you was, and this is a technical assistance facility that SPTF runs for the Caribbean. And this allows us to offer subsidized training for your institution or your network. And it can cover topics of consumer protection, social and environmental performance. And we are just releasing this year the new standards on responsible digitalization. So if your institution is interested in receiving training on any of those topics, that's something that you can access at a subsidized rate through the RIFCAC, which is this responsible and inclusive finance facility. We also do co-financing of external audits. That can be a social audit, client protection certification, social rating, any of those kind of evaluations, including the pilot evaluation of these standards for responsible digitalization, which is also something I think that's going to be very relevant for the Caribbean. And the co-financing means that SPTF pays for 50% of the project and the financial institution pays for 50% of the project, as long as SPTF's contribution is up to $18,000. So it could be $18,000 or 50% of the project cost, whichever is less. You can also apply for funds to implement your action plan and fix your gaps, whether those gaps are on the social or environmental side, or whether you want to build resilience in your institution. We have leadership coaching that's available to help build resilience in your organization. And we also can co-finance the implementation of climate adaptation projects. So it's a very timely collaboration with YAPU Solutions and the Scale for Resilience project, because that is something that SPTF is also interested and able to fund in the Caribbean. And I just want to let everyone know that we're currently accepting applications for this kind of support. And you can find the application online and complete the whole application process online. And the date and the link are here on this slide. It's the next submission deadline is June 30th. And if you have any questions about anything that I've said today, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. My email is included also in the slides. And that's where I'm going to close and give the mic back to Marta. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cara. It's been really interesting to get to know specifically about the TA facility, because it's true that microfinance institutions can have some trouble maybe with all these new requirements of investors, new indicators, and new measuring requirements. So it's great that they can have support. I think that's very important. And also it's great to know that there's alliances in this resilience sphere. For instance, the one that you mentioned about the Green Index and the Dimension 7. It's great that the European Microfinance Platform could join SPTF in this adventure. So it's very good to get to know about all of this. Thank you. I just want to let you know the participants that there's another panel starting shortly in the next minutes. So if they want to join the next panel, they have to go to the lobby, and from there they can join. And also I want to let know the participants that they can ask any questions that they want to the panelists, and they will be answered during the panel. So now we are starting the debate part. This is the most interactive part. We have a series of questions, a set of questions of different types for the panelists. So the first ones would be related to the stakeholders within these resilience dimensions. So I would like to ask both of you, within the ecosystem of climate, biodiversity, and inclusive finance, who do you think are the main stakeholders operating, and how are their missions, ambitions, and actions aligned? And if you think there are any notable disruptive partnerships. So for instance, the one that I just mentioned about the Green Index and Dimension 7. So Cara, Davide?
I go? Yeah. So thanks for the possibility to answer that. So what I think is interesting, of course, the case of SPTF, the case of the Green Inclusive and Climate Smart Finance Action Group are clearly a set of partnership that I will strongly encourage. Of course, Cara, you can speak for the SPTF, to any interested actor to join, because it clearly is a place where we can align practices, and it can also generate partnerships. For example, for the Green Inclusive and Climate Smart Finance Action Group, is really the idea to generate multi-stakeholder partnership to try to align on a similar scope. For example, among our members, that is today are around 75, 80 institutions. You can find commercial banks, you can find universities, you can find networks of microfinance institutions, you can find certain microfinance institutions, even if it's not been the focus, you can find consulting, technology provider, etc. That is one kind of actor. Then, of course, you have the main actor that you want to look at that are typically the one that found the projects. We have various big actors, so it will not be worth to just state some representative one, but the one that as of now are as having this key focus to support adaptation to climate change, biodiversity conservation, have a mandate from UN and from the World Bank, for example, is the Green Climate Fund, that is putting out quite some fund, both in terms of financial instrument, but also technical assistance, as well as the GEF, the Global Environmental Facility. These are the two that many times are money that are sourced also for impact investor, but also from United Nations agency. It's not always easy to get this money, by the way, because it's a very long procedure. So typically the suggestion is to partner with someone that is able to manage such kind of fund request that is pretty complicated to go through, but then is what can bring to a path of change. There are also private entities that are involved in the moving forward into this direction. Of course, Gava Capital here is an example, moving toward climate financing, but are various other, both from the private banking sector, so the commercial banking sector, as well as the impact finance. What I think is interesting, at least from our perspective as a Just Institute, and then I leave the word to Cara. I think that we've been putting quite a lot of effort to build from scratch private-public partnerships into our coalition and member and partners, build it around an objective, a common objective, and built from scratch from the very beginning project that aim to be scaled up into an offer to the market, as well as into an offer into international agency beyond the project life. So, for example, the two projects have been seen before. One is structuring financial product for climate change adaptation, and the other one is to support certification for climate change adaptation. So if you're interested to be certified, once you then go through certain paths, knock our door, is that it's been co-designed from the very beginning by two kind of actors, actually three. One is commercial banking, for example, represented by the BNP Paribas, so the group. The other are impact investor fund, like the Fondation Grameen Crédit Agricole, that is a foundation just focusing to financing inclusive finance, is the foundation from the Crédit Agricole. And the other is the IFAD, the International Agency for Financing Agriculture. So you could imagine this kind of cooperation that's focused all into financing with the non-financial and financial means the transition. Over.
Okay. I think that partnership is something that is very important to the SPTF, and ever since its founding in 2005, we have been very committed to partnerships and harmonization with industry initiatives. And so I think instead of viewing partnership as disruptive, we really view it as essential. And so that's why SPTF works so hard to collaborate with all different types of stakeholders in the industry. Our members include, financial institutions, regulators, investors, networks, both at the national, regional, and international levels. And whenever we set out to work on something like environmental performance management or digital standards, we always look at what has gone before and try to align with it rather than kind of creating something new and duplicating effort. We're always really trying to also streamline and reduce the reporting burden on financial institutions. And so that's one of the things that the collaboration with Cerise has allowed us to do by working with the impact investors to get them to accept reports from Cerise social audit tool. Then that reduces the reporting burden for institutions that have to report on their social and environmental performance to their investors. So yes, we definitely welcome partnerships with all different kinds of stakeholders and really try to make sure that our work stays aligned with all the major initiatives in the industry.
Yes, that's essential, right? To have successful resilience finance, we need alliances, we need collaboration. And it's great to know that from both organizations you are involved in different collaborations and initiatives with other stakeholders. So that's great. Also, there would be some questions regarding vulnerable populations. So it would be great to know if you believe that there's enough focus of vulnerable populations within resilience, and also, how do you think that women are disproportionately affected by financial inclusion and biodiversity impacts, and how the institution and the research field is addressing this? Whoever prefers.
Well, we definitely have seen with our research on how to implement responsible digitalization that women are disproportionately affected. You know, first in an access to finance, and then next in access to digital technologies, and then finally also in education. And so what we are working on with our new digital financial services standards is to really like put indicators in those standards that make financial institutions think about the bias that may be creeping in to their algorithms, to their processes. Because if you don't gather the data and analyze it, you don't know, whether or not men and women in your portfolio are receiving equal amounts of credit, even if they have the same profile, risk profile. And so that's one of the ways in which, our whole focus is vulnerable populations because of Social Performance Task Force. So, with our standards, our universal standards apply to any financial service provider that has a social mission. So whether that's just inclusive finance, or it's women's empowerment, or poverty reduction, or climate adaptation, whatever the institution's social objectives are, these universal standards apply to them, because it doesn't tell you what your mission should be. It just tells you how to achieve that mission through strategic and operational practices, because they're management standards. But I think, we very much have seen in our research that women are disproportionately affected by things like climate change and access to digital technology and access to credit. And that's something that we are trying to collect data on and encourage financial institutions to look into, analyze, and take action to try to help mitigate that kind of unconscious bias that seems to be present.
So from my side, I fully agree on what stated so far. At the level of climate and biodiversity losses, it is a known fact that women are among the most affected when, for example, CBD, that is the main actor into the Convention on Biological Diversity, report that the IPCC reported as well, that is monitoring the climate change impact on various populations. The reason is relatively simple, being already economically and socially excluded women compared to men in general in various societies. They also are more vulnerable, and because the biodiversity losses and climate change is exposed to further vulnerability, are among the most affected one. But the end of the story is not the most, and also the lower coping mechanism, of course. But the end of the story is not there, is also because the kind of product and service that typically are designed are not gender centric, so are rather designed for active population on average, that for the majority are by men. So typically they do not fit what are the most need of women, for example, for the kind of activity they do, for how do they do the activity. And so I think is a key for anything that we do, for example, in nature-based solution, that is like included into the project we manage for the GEF and IFAD that they were just presented before, to have a nature-based solution, gender-oriented approach. So some nature-based solution will work better in certain conditions for certain gender and some for others, because they're gonna generate adaptive capacity to specific risk that different part of the population will be more affected or not. Over.
Yeah, thank you for your insights. It's true that, well, at some points, MFIs don't really know how their portfolios may be biased, and it's great that there are some indicators that can push over into more women being involved and receiving loans. And also, as Davide mentioned, there's a lack of gender-centric products, so this should be fostered. But I believe that we are in a path into it, so that's a great to know. And also, well, I would like to have some concluding comments from both of you about the resilience dimension, and how do you look forward into how would they evolve, do you believe? Clara, Davide?
So I take it first then. I've been lucky to see a bit the field of green inclusive finance starting from, the first experience and a bit evolving in the last 10, 15 years. And I would like to acknowledge the fact that back in time, 12, 13 years ago, that was basically interpreted as we need to, as a friend of mine say, we need to preserve panda, to save pandas. That was green inclusive finance, or to finance solar panels. That was the interpretation. And that was a bit difficult sale for any kind of actors. Even, of course, you need to protect panda, that's clear. I like pandas. But it was not included into, economic activities, and why this burden, as was being thought long back in time, need to be brought, sustained by the poor population. Now that there's been this evolution to put in the center the topic of resilience into green finance, that means there is no way in which we're going to implement a sustainable activity if that is not resilient, because that will be just out of market soon. And I tend to believe that by the pledge you see at the country level, as well as what is happening into the field, many microfinance institutions now are raising much more interest because they understand that green finance is building resiliencies that are sustainable. It will be a long-lasting and increasing field. And in any case, it's the only one we can go through, because or we go or we just don't make it. So I'm quite positive of that. There are still some gap to break, and I don't want to go that in detail, but we need to go beyond the perception. And many times we believe that investing into adaptation is not an investment with return, because you need to invest in the practices that avoid the risk, that are generating profitability. Nature-based solutions clearly, for example, show the reverse, that if you focus on to medium-term return, you generate a profile of lower risk and higher return. So thus we need to break our, our mindset that it's better investing into a product that has a return tomorrow, rather than investing in something that's a higher return at medium term and reduce your risk today. Over.
Yes, I think that's that idea about the fact that this is investment rather than expenditure is really important to what we do also at the level of SPTF. And we firmly believe, and that belief is sort of based on what we have seen over the last 20 years of working in the microfinance sector, and also like inclusive finance more broadly, that investing in these practices does produce a return. It is not just better for your clients, it is better for the financial institutions that serve these clients to have a strong social and environmental performance. And it does create a return in the medium and long term. And it creates, I think, economic benefits for the institution, right? More client loyalty, better staff retention, decreased late portfolio. There's definitely financial rewards for working on these topics, but there are also benefits to the clients and to the environment for having a clear strategy and clear work plan towards a strong social and environmental performance. And so that's something that we definitely promote. And I think in light of the topic for this panel and this conference today, what we have found is that not only does it produce financial benefits for the institution and social benefits for the clients, and better environmental practices for nature, but it creates more resilient institutions. So if you implement the universal standards for social and environmental performance, you will have created a more resilient institution that will be better able to handle the next crisis, whatever that crisis is, whether it's from nature or political disruption or a health disruption like the pandemic. So we know that the world is getting more kind of unstable, uncertain, in the sense of increased climate change and political upheaval and things like that. And so it really is an investment in the long-term sustainability of the financial institution to work on these topics and to use this framework to become a stronger organization that's better able to help all of its stakeholders. One of which is obviously the environment, one of which is the clients, and one of which is the shareholders. But all of those stakeholders are better off if you implement this system.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you, Cara and Davide, for your insights, and thank you for working at the organizations that you're working at. They are really important nowadays, and it's great to see that there's alliances and initiatives to work towards resilience, and that there's more conscience about resilience each time. So thank you, everyone who joined the panel. Also, it would be great if you want to join Scale for Resilience. We would love to have you as members. So you have the link over there. As well, you had the emails in case you want to contact Cara, Davide. So thank you very much for joining. The next panel has started already, so you can join to the next one going to the lobby. And well, thank you both for participating. It's been a great panel. Thank you.